The iron gates of the park compound rose like black teeth against the storm, 30 feet of reinforced steel that had never opened for uninvited guests. Rain hammered the asphalt in sheets, turning the exclusive Seoul district into a battlefield of water and wind. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the desperate figure pressed against those gates. Zara Williams pounded her fists against the metal, her knuckles already raw and bleeding. Blood mixed with rainwater streaked down her dark skin, testament to her flight through the city's unforgiving streets. Her clothes clung to her trembling frame, torn and soaked, but her eyes burned with determination that the storm could not extinguish. "Please," she called out, her voice nearly lost in the thunder. "I know you're watching. I know you can hear me." 3 stories above, behind bulletproof glass that cost more than most people's homes, Jinwoo Park stood motionless in his study. The security monitors displayed every angle of his fortress, but his attention fixed on the woman at his gate. She had been there for 20 minutes, refusing to flee despite the weather's violence. Most people crossed the street when they saw his compound. This woman had come directly to his door. "I'm curious where you're watching this story unfold from tonight," he murmured to himself, studying her through the cameras. "Are you somewhere safe and warm, or do you understand what it means to stand in the cold, demanding sanctuary from dangerous men?" His fingers drummed against the mahogany desk, a gesture his enemies would recognize as the moment before he made decisions that changed lives forever. The woman possessed something rare in his world. Courage or desperation, he could not yet determine which. "Sir," his head of security spoke from behind him. "Should we remove her?" Jinwoo's reflection merged with the monitor's glow, creating the illusion of a predator watching prey. At 32, he commanded the largest Korean crime syndicate in the city through calculated brutality and unwavering control. Men twice his age bowed when he entered rooms. Politicians answered his calls on the first ring. Yet this woman's presence at his gate intrigued him more than any business proposition he had received in years. 6 hours earlier, Zara had believed she was safe. The women's shelter in Gangnam had promised anonymity, protection from the man whose fists had painted bruises across her ribs for 3 years. Marcus Richardson had found her anyway. He always found her. The memory burned through her exhaustion, his voice echoing down the shelter's hallway, demanding the staff produce his woman. His threats turning violent when they refused. Her desperate escape through the back exit, running through Seoul's maze of streets with nowhere left to hide. She had chosen the park compound because desperate people made desperate decisions. Everyone in the city knew the stories. Jinwoo Park, the Dragon of Seoul, who protected those under his control with absolute ruthlessness. If she could convince him to help her, Marcus would never dare follow. The intercom crackled to life. "State your business." Her breath caught. They were listening. "My name is Zara Williams," she said, pressing closer to the speaker. "I need protection from someone who wants to hurt me. I know who you are. I know what you're capable of. I'm asking for sanctuary." The silence stretched like a blade's edge. Rain continued its assault, but she remained motionless, waiting for judgment from the unseen power beyond those gates. In his study, Jinwoo tilted his head. Her accent carried traces of America, but her desperation was universal. Women did not approach his compound seeking help unless their situations had become truly dire. The blood on her hands suggested violence recent enough to still burn. "Why should the dragon concern himself with one woman's troubles?" he asked through the intercom. "Because I have something you need," she replied without hesitation. "Information about Marcus Richardson and his connections to the Russian syndicate trying to move territory into your district." Jinwoo's stillness became absolute. The Russians had been probing his borders for months, testing his organization's responses. If this woman possessed intelligence about their operations, her value extended beyond mere curiosity. "Bring her inside," he commanded his security team. "Full escort. Search her thoroughly but treat her as a guest." The gates began their slow swing inward, revealing a driveway lined with armed men who materialized from the shadows like vengeful spirits. Zara straightened her spine, gathering the remnants of her dignity around her like armor. She had gambled her life on this moment. As she stepped through those gates, leaving the storm behind, she entered a world where power flowed through violence and mercy came with prices that would reshape her existence forever. The Dragon of Soul was about to decide her fate, and she could only hope her desperation had not led her into a trap more dangerous than the one she had fled. The interior of the park compound defied every expectation Zara had formed during her desperate approach to those imposing gates. Italian marble floors gleamed like mirrors beneath crystal chandeliers that cast warm honey light across walls adorned with priceless Korean art. The scent of sandalwood and leather permeated the air, a masculine signature of wealth and power that seemed to emanate from the very walls. Jinwoo's guards had searched her with professional efficiency, their movements respectful but thorough. They treated her like a dignitary under suspicious circumstances rather than a desperate fugitive, which told her more about their employer's character than any reputation could convey. Now she stood in his private study, water still dripping from her hair onto Persian rugs worth more than her annual salary. Jinwoo Park occupied the space behind his desk like a king holding court, his presence both magnetic and dangerous. He wore a charcoal suit tailored to perfection, every line emphasizing the controlled power in his lean frame. His eyes, dark and analytical, studied her with the intensity of a predator deciding whether his visitor represented opportunity or threat. "You mentioned information about Marcus Richardson," he said, his voice carrying the cultured accent of private education layered over something far more primal. "Before we discuss terms, I require proof of your claims." Zara straightened, ignoring the exhaustion that threatened to buckle her knees. "Marcus has been feeding intelligence to Dmitry Volkov about your shipping operations through Busan port. He photographed your manifest schedules and documented your security rotations. The Russians plan to intercept your next 3 shipments." Jinwoo's expression remained unchanged, but the quality of his stillness shifted into something lethal. "How did you acquire this information?" "I was his girlfriend for 3 years," she said, the words tasting bitter in her mouth. "He thought I was too afraid to pay attention when he conducted business at home. Men like Marcus underestimate women like me. They see submission where we practice survival." The silence stretched between them, filled only by the rain's continued assault against the windows. Jinwoo rose from his chair with fluid grace, moving to the bar cart where crystal decanters reflected the room's warm light. He poured 2 glasses of what appeared to be expensive whiskey, approaching her with measured steps. "You have given me valuable intelligence," he said, offering her a glass. "Intelligence that will save my organization considerable resources and eliminate a significant threat. This creates a debt between us." Zara accepted the whiskey but did not drink, too aware that clarity might mean the difference between survival and destruction. "What kind of debt?" Jinwoo moved to the window overlooking his compound's grounds, his silhouette framed against the storm. "The kind that requires negotiation. You need protection from a violent man. I need a solution to a family problem that threatens my position within the organization. Perhaps we can assist each other." He turned back to face her, and she glimpsed something unexpected beneath his controlled exterior. Vulnerability, carefully contained but unmistakably present. "My grandmother, the matriarch of our family, has issued an ultimatum," he continued. "I must marry within 6 months or forfeit my claim to leadership of the park syndicate. She believes a man without a wife lacks the stability necessary to guide our organization into the next generation." Zara felt the conversation's direction like a physical force pressing against her chest. "You want me to marry you? A marriage of convenience," he clarified. 6 months of playing the devoted wife in public while maintaining separate private lives. In exchange, you receive complete protection from Marcus Richardson and any other threats, housing in this compound, a generous monthly allowance, and at the contract's conclusion, enough money to disappear anywhere in the world. The offer hung between them like a bridge across an abyss, tempting and terrifying in equal measure. Zara set down her untouched whiskey, her mind racing through implications and alternatives. She had fled to his gates seeking temporary sanctuary. He was offering something far more complex and potentially more dangerous than anything Marcus could inflict. "What guarantees would I have?" she asked, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "How do I know you won't decide I'm more valuable as a permanent prisoner than a temporary wife?" Jinwoo's smile was sharp as winter wind. "Because, Miss Williams, my word is the foundation upon which my empire rests. Break faith with me, and you will find my protection absolute. Betray me, and you will discover why men cross themselves when they speak my name." Before she could respond, his phone buzzed with incoming intelligence. Jinwoo answered with crisp efficiency, listening to rapid Korean that Zara could not understand. His expression darkened as the conversation progressed. "Marcus Richardson has discovered your location," he said after ending the call. "He is currently 15 minutes from this compound with 6 associates, all armed. They believe they can retrieve you through intimidation and violence." Terror and fury warred in Zara's chest. Even here, behind these walls with one of Seoul's most feared men, Marcus refused to let her escape his control. Jinwoo moved to his desk, pressing a button that connected him to his security network. "Code 7, he commanded. 6 hostile targets approaching main entrance. Neutralize with extreme prejudice. No survivors to report back." Zara watched him transform from negotiating businessman into something ancient and terrible, a dragon awakening to protect his territory. The casual efficiency with which he ordered violence should have terrified her. Instead, she felt something closer to relief. For the first time in 3 years, someone possessed both the power and willingness to end Marcus's reign of terror. Through the study's windows, she observed black-clad figures moving across the compound's grounds like deadly shadows. Floodlights blazed to life, turning night into harsh clarity. The sound of vehicles approaching echoed through the storm, followed by the distinctive crack of gunfire. Jinwoo remained motionless behind his desk, monitoring events through security feeds with the detached interest of a general directing battlefield operations. The violence outside lasted less than 4 minutes before silence returned to the night. "It is finished," he said simply. "Marcus Richardson will never threaten you again." Zara sank into the leather chair opposite his desk, the reality of her situation crystallizing with terrifying clarity. She had sought protection and received annihilation of her problems. But such power came with prices that extended far beyond simple gratitude. "The marriage contract," she said. "What would be expected of me beyond public appearances? Absolute discretion regarding my business affairs. Compliance with security protocols for your own safety. Public behavior consistent with devotion and respect. In private, you maintain your independence within the boundaries of this compound. And if I refuse?" Jinwoo's gaze met hers with perfect honesty. "Then you are free to leave through those gates and face whatever waits for you in the wider world. But understand that my protection dies the moment you step beyond this property. Your problems have been solved, but new ones may arise from different sources." Zara understood the subtext with painful clarity. She could leave, but the knowledge she possessed about his operations made her a liability. Her freedom had become theoretical at best. "I accept your terms," she said, the words sealing her fate with their finality. Jinwoo nodded once, the gesture carrying the weight of absolute commitment. "Welcome to your new life, Mrs. Park. Tomorrow we begin the performance that will save us both." 3 days into her new existence as Mrs. Park, Zara discovered that luxury could feel as confining as any prison cell. Her quarters occupied the compound's east wing, a suite of rooms decorated in cream and gold that rivaled any 5-star hotel. Silk curtains framed windows that offered stunning views of Seoul's skyline, but those same windows were reinforced with bulletproof glass that reminded her daily of the dangerous world she had entered. She woke each morning to find fresh clothes waiting in the walk-in closet, designer pieces in her exact measurements that someone had acquired with disturbing efficiency. Breakfast appeared on bone china plates carried by silent staff who bowed respectfully but avoided direct eye contact. Everything she could want was provided, except the freedom to leave these walls or the illusion that she controlled her circumstances. Jinwoo had been notably absent since their contract negotiation. managing his empire from offices within the compound that remained off-limits to his temporary wife. She caught glimpses of him during his early morning workouts in the private gymnasium, his lean form moving through martial arts routines with lethal precision. The sight of him practicing combat techniques should have frightened her. Instead, she found herself watching from her window, fascinated by the controlled power he wielded over his own body with the same mastery he applied to his criminal organization. On the fourth morning, their paths finally crossed in the compound's main dining room. Jinwoo sat at the head of a table designed to seat 20, reading intelligence reports while consuming what appeared to be a breakfast prepared by professional chefs. He looked up when she entered, his dark eyes assessing her with the same analytical attention he had shown during their first meeting. "Good morning, Mrs. Park," he said, his voice carrying formal politeness that maintained careful distance. "I trust your accommodations are satisfactory." Zara moved to the opposite end of the table, deliberately claiming space rather than asking permission. "The accommodations are beautiful," she replied, accepting coffee from a hovering servant. "But I'm curious about the security protocols you mentioned. How exactly does this marriage arrangement work in practice?" Jinwoo set aside his reports, giving her his complete attention. "Today we visit my grandmother for lunch. She will assess your suitability as my wife and future matriarch of our family. Your performance during this meeting will determine whether our arrangement continues or requires renegotiation." The implicit threat in his words was subtle but unmistakable. Zara met his gaze without flinching, a gesture that seemed to surprise him. "And what kind of performance are you expecting?" she asked. "The devoted wife who speaks only when spoken to, or something more authentic?" A smile ghosted across Jinwoo's lips, the first genuine expression she had witnessed from him. "My grandmother possesses a keen intelligence that cannot be fooled by obvious acting. She will expect to see a woman strong enough to stand beside me, not behind me. Show her your natural strength and she will approve." After breakfast, Jinwoo led her through sections of the compound she had not previously seen. The building's architecture blended traditional Korean elements with modern security features, creating spaces that felt both elegant and fortress-like. Art from centuries past hung beside contemporary pieces, suggesting a man who honored heritage while embracing innovation. They passed a room where Jinwoo conducted meetings with his lieutenants, and through the briefly opened door, Zara glimpsed maps, photographs, and documents that spoke of an organization whose reach extended far beyond Seoul's borders. The scale of his empire impressed and intimidated her in equal measure. "Your family has controlled this territory for 3 generations, she observed as they walked. "For," he corrected, "my great-grandfather established our foundation during the Japanese occupation. Each generation has expanded our influence and refined our methods. The position I hold was earned through blood and strategy, not birthright alone." Something in his tone suggested pain beneath the pride, a wound that had shaped him into the controlled predator he had become. Zara filed the observation away, beginning to understand that Jinwoo's armor contained vulnerabilities he kept carefully hidden. The visit to his grandmother's residence revealed another layer of Jinwoo's world. Park Eun-hee lived in a traditional Hanok house surrounded by gardens that bloomed despite the season's harsh weather. At 78, she commanded respect through presence rather than intimidation. Her silver hair arranged in elegant waves, and her dark eyes sharp with intelligence that missed nothing. "So," she said in accented English, studying Zara with the thoroughness of an art appraiser examining a potential masterpiece, "this is the woman who has captured my grandson's heart." The lunch conversation became a subtle interrogation disguised as polite interest. Jinwoo's grandmother probed Zara's background, her family history, her education, and her understanding of the responsibilities that came with their family name. Zara answered honestly about her American upbringing, her work as a social worker, and her recent escape from an abusive relationship. "You have survived difficult circumstances," the elder woman observed. "This suggests strength of character. But marrying into our family requires more than survival. It demands leadership, wisdom, and absolute loyalty to those under your protection." "I understand the weight of responsibility," Zara replied. But I also believe that strength comes from lifting others up, not holding them down. Jinwoo's grandmother smiled for the first time during their visit, her approval evident in the warmth that replaced her analytical coolness. You will do well in this family, she declared. Jinwoo has chosen wisely. The drive back to the compound passed in comfortable silence, both of them processing the successful completion of their first test. Jinwoo seemed more relaxed, the rigid control that usually governed his behavior softening slightly. That evening, Zara discovered him in his study, shirt sleeves rolled up and a cut across his knuckles that spoke of recent violence. Blood had dried along the wound's edges, suggesting he had ignored the injury in favor of more pressing concerns. You're hurt, she said, entering without invitation. Jinwoo glanced up from his papers, following her gaze to his injured hand. A minor disagreement with a business partner who forgot the terms of our arrangement. Nothing requiring concern. Zara moved to the bar cart where she had noticed a first aid kit during her previous visit. Let me clean that properly. Infection could cause more problems than whatever disagreement created the cut. She approached his desk with supplies in hand, expecting him to refuse her assistance. Instead, Jinwoo extended his injured hand with surprising compliance, watching her face as she examined the wound. This will sting, she warned, applying antiseptic with gentle efficiency. Jinwoo remained motionless during her ministrations, but she felt him studying her with an intensity that had nothing to do with pain assessment. His hand was larger than hers, calloused from training and scarred from previous conflicts. The intimacy of touching him, of providing care he clearly received rarely, created an unexpected tension between them. You were a social worker, he said as she wrapped his knuckles with medical tape. You chose a profession dedicated to helping people. Because everyone deserves someone who believes they can become better than their worst moments, she replied, meeting his eyes. Even dangerous men who build empires through violence sometimes need someone to see their humanity. Jinwoo's expression shifted, revealing depths she had only glimpsed during their previous interactions. For a moment, his carefully maintained control faltered, and she saw the lonely man beneath the fearsome reputation. My father died when I was 15, he said quietly, shot by rivals who wanted to claim our territory. I inherited his position, his enemies, and his legacy of violence. Sometimes I wonder what I might have become if I had been allowed to choose a different path. The vulnerability in his admission caught Zara off guard. This was not the calculated sharing of strategic information, but genuine confession from a man who rarely allowed himself such honesty. You're choosing your path now, she replied. Every decision you make shapes who you become, regardless of how you started. They remained frozen in that moment, her hands still cradling his injured one, both of them recognizing that something fundamental had shifted between them. The attraction that had simmered beneath their formal arrangement blazed suddenly into acknowledgement, dangerous and undeniable. Jinwoo pulled his hand free, the movement breaking their connection but not erasing its impact. Thank you for the medical attention, he said, his voice returning to its usual controlled tone. You should rest. Tomorrow begins a new phase of our arrangement. Zara gathered the medical supplies, acutely aware of the heat that lingered where they had touched. As she reached the study door, she turned back to find him watching her with an expression she could not decipher. Good night, Jinwoo, she said, using his given name for the first time. Good night, Zara, he replied, and the way he spoke her name made her realize their marriage of convenience was becoming something far more complicated and infinitely more dangerous than either of them had anticipated. The intelligence arrived at 4 in the morning, delivered by one of Jinwoo's most trusted operatives who had infiltrated Seoul's underground networks for information that could save or destroy empires. Zara woke to the sound of urgent voices in Korean echoing through the compound's corridors, a language she had begun learning but could not yet fully understand. The tension in those voices transcended linguistic barriers, communicating danger with primal clarity. She found Jinwoo in his study, surrounded by photographs, documents, and electronic surveillance equipment that painted a picture more terrifying than any nightmare. His usual immaculate appearance had given way to rolled sleeves and disheveled hair, suggesting he had been awake for hours processing information that changed everything. "Marcus is alive," he said without preamble, his voice carrying a fury that made the air itself feel dangerous. "My men confirmed the kill, but apparently they executed one of his associates while he escaped through a service tunnel. He has spent the past week making contact with the Choi Syndicate." Zara's blood turned to ice water in her veins. The Choi family represented Jinwoo's primary rivals for control over Seoul's criminal territories, a violent clan whose methods made even hardened criminals uncomfortable. If Marcus had allied himself with them, her past had become weaponized against her present. "What does he want?" she asked, though she already knew the answer with sickening certainty. "You?" Jinwoo replied, turning surveillance photographs toward her that showed Marcus meeting with Choi lieutenants in dimly lit restaurants. "And through you, leverage against me. He has told them about our marriage arrangement, our financial dealings, and the location of safe houses they have been seeking for months." The photographs revealed Marcus looking healthier and more confident than she had seen him in years. His alliance with the Choi Syndicate had given him resources and protection that transformed him from desperate abuser into genuine threat. "Today is the charity gala at the Latte Hotel," Jinwoo continued. 500 of Seoul's most influential people will attend, including politicians, business leaders, and heads of major crime families. "We must appear as planned to maintain the facade of normalcy, but the risk has escalated beyond acceptable parameters." Zara studied the intelligence reports, her social work background helping her analyze patterns of behavior and motivation that others might miss. "Cancel the appearance," she suggested. "If they're planning something public, why give them the opportunity?" Jinwoo's expression darkened. "Because canceling would signal weakness to every faction watching our organization. The moment my enemies believe I fear them, they will strike from multiple directions simultaneously. We attend, but with modified security protocols." The charity gala transformed into a battlefield disguised as high society elegance. Jinwoo arrived in his role as successful businessman, his tuxedo tailored to perfection while concealing the body armor beneath. Zara wore emerald silk that complemented her skin tone while allowing concealed weapons that Jinwoo's security team had insisted upon. They moved through the glittering crowd like dancers performing a choreographed routine, each smile and conversation calculated to project strength and unity. Zara recognized the tension in Jinwoo's body language, the way his eyes constantly scanned the crowd for threats while maintaining casual conversation with Seoul's elite. His protective instincts had sharpened to predatory intensity, and she realized that bringing her to this event represented the most dangerous gamble of his career. The attack came during the dinner service, when waitstaff moved through tables with military precision and guests focused on conversations rather than their surroundings. Zara noticed the server approaching their table because his movements were wrong, too purposeful and direct compared to the others circulating the room. She grabbed Jinwoo's arm just as the man's hand moved toward his jacket, her warning coming a split second before chaos erupted. Jinwoo reacted with lethal efficiency, overturning their table to create cover while drawing a weapon that appeared in his hand like magic. The assassin's shot went wide, shattering crystal and sending guests screaming toward exits. Security descended on the scene with overwhelming force, Jinwoo's men emerging from positions throughout the ballroom like avenging spirits. The would-be killer died before he could fire a second shot, but the message had been delivered with crystal clarity. The Choi Syndicate could reach them anywhere, anytime, and Zara's presence made Jinwoo vulnerable in ways that his enemies would exploit without mercy. In the aftermath, as police sirens wailed outside and witnesses gave statements to investigators who understood the importance of selective blindness, Jinwoo's fury became a physical presence that cleared rooms. He paced his study like a caged predator, his control hanging by threads that grew thinner with each passing moment. "They used you as bait," he said, his voice low and deadly. "They knew I would bring you tonight, knew that threatening you would force me into reactive rather than strategic behavior. This cannot continue." Zara refused to cower in the corner where his bodyguards had initially placed her for safety. Instead, she stood directly in his path, forcing him to acknowledge her presence. "Then we end it," she said with quiet determination. "No more defensive strategies. We take the fight to them. Jinwoo stopped pacing, his attention focusing on her with laser intensity. You are not a soldier, Zara. You are a civilian who has been drawn into a war that could destroy you. I stopped being a civilian the moment I walked through your gates, she replied. Marcus made this personal when he allied with your enemies. I won't hide behind your protection while they use me as a weapon against you. Before Jinwoo could respond, his phone rang with the specific tone reserved for emergency contacts. He answered with sharp efficiency, listening to rapid Korean that drained color from his face. When he ended the call, his expression had transformed into something ancient and terrible. They have taken you, he said, his voice barely recognizing its own impossibility. Confusion lasted only seconds before understanding crashed over Zara like Arctic water. The woman standing in his study was not the target. They had kidnapped someone else, someone who resembled her enough to be mistaken in dim lighting. Her replacement at the charity gala had been a decoy while the real trap closed around an innocent substitute. No, Jinwoo continued, studying security footage on his phone with growing horror. They took you from the hotel service elevator 20 minutes ago. The woman I have been speaking with is not Zara Williams. The realization struck them both simultaneously. Zara was still here, still safe, but somewhere in Seoul's sprawling metropolis. The Choice Syndicate held a woman they believed to be Jinwoo's wife. The psychological warfare had escalated beyond anything either organization had previously attempted. Within hours, the kidnapping video arrived through encrypted channels designed to avoid police detection. The bound woman's face was obscured, but her voice carried American accents similar enough to Zara's to be convincing in poor audio quality. Marcus appeared in the frame, his smile cold with anticipated victory. I have your wife, Jinwoo, he said directly to the camera. The woman you value more than your empire. I want $50 million, control over your Busan shipping operations, and safe passage out of Korea. You have 24 hours to comply, or she dies slowly while you listen. Jinwoo watched the video with expression carved from granite, but Zara saw his hands trembling with rage that threatened to consume everything in its path. The violation of taking someone under his protection had triggered something primal and destructive in his psyche. They will kill her even if you pay, Zara said quietly. Marcus doesn't forgive or forget. He uses violence to maintain control, and letting anyone challenge him successfully would undermine his authority with the Choi family. Jinwoo nodded once, his decision crystallizing with terrifying clarity. Then we extract her before the deadline expires. Every resource, every ally, every favor owed to our organization. The Choi Syndicate has made the mistake of believing they understand the depths of my commitment to those under my protection. He turned to face Zara directly, his eyes burning with emotion that had nothing to do with strategic calculation. But you will remain here in the compound, surrounded by security that would make military installations envious. I cannot wage war while worrying about your safety. No, Zara said, her voice carrying absolute determination. That woman is suffering because she resembles me, because my past created weapons that your enemies are using against you. I'm going to help you get her back. The argument that followed revealed truths neither of them had been willing to acknowledge. Jinwoo's protective instincts extended far beyond contractual obligations, rooted in emotions that transformed his calculated control into desperate need. Zara's refusal to remain safely hidden demonstrated courage that impressed and terrified him in equal measure. You could die, he said finally, the admission scraping against his throat like broken glass. If they kill you, nothing else matters. Not my empire, not my family's legacy, nothing. Do you understand what you have become to me? The confession hung between them like a bridge across an abyss, dangerous and beautiful in its absolute honesty. Zara moved closer to him, close enough to see her reflection in his dark eyes. I understand, she whispered, her own feelings laid bare by crisis and honesty. But understanding doesn't change what we have to do. That woman's life matters. Your honor matters. We save her, and then we finish Marcus and his allies permanently. Jinwoo pulled her against his chest, his arms becoming a fortress around her trembling form. The embrace lasted only seconds before duty reasserted itself, but it communicated everything words could not express. Love had grown between them like wildfire, consuming the careful distance they had maintained and replacing it with something worth dying to protect. "Prepare the assault teams," he commanded his waiting lieutenants. "We go in at dawn. Full tactical deployment. No survivors among the enemy forces. The Choi Syndicate ends tonight." Dawn came like a blade across Seoul's skyline, cutting through the darkness with surgical precision that matched Jinwoo's preparation for war. The compound transformed into a military command center with maps, surveillance equipment, and weapons, creating an arsenal that spoke of years preparing for this moment. Jinwoo moved through his organization's final preparations with the focused intensity of a predator about to strike. Zara had insisted on joining the tactical briefing, her presence creating tension among his lieutenants, who understood the unprecedented nature of a civilian's involvement in their operations. She studied building schematics and security protocols with the analytical mind that had made her effective in social work, identifying patterns and vulnerabilities that military-trained operatives might overlook. The warehouse district in Incheon provided perfect cover for the Choi Syndicate's operations, its maze of abandoned buildings and industrial infrastructure creating dozens of potential hiding places. Jinwoo's intelligence network had narrowed the location to 3 possibilities, but the wrong choice would cost precious time and potentially the hostage's life. "Here," Zara said, pointing to the middle warehouse on the tactical map. "Marcus prefers buildings with multiple exit routes but only one easily defended entrance. This structure matches his behavioral patterns from every safe house he used during our relationship." Jinwoo studied her analysis, recognizing the intimate knowledge of his enemy's psychology that only prolonged exposure could provide. Her insights had proved invaluable throughout their planning, transforming her from protected asset into strategic partner. "You will coordinate from the command vehicle," he said, his voice carrying the authority that brooked no argument. "Monitor communications and provide intelligence updates as the situation develops. But you will not enter that building." Zara met his gaze with quiet determination. "We'll see what the situation requires," she replied, refusing to make promises she might need to break. The assault commenced with overwhelming force designed to end resistance before it could organize effectively. Jinwoo's teams moved through the warehouse complex like hunting wolves, their coordination perfected through years of operating in Seoul's most dangerous territories. Explosives breached entry points simultaneously while snipers eliminated external guards with silent efficiency. Inside the target building, Marcus had prepared for siege warfare, his partnership with the Choi Syndicate providing resources and manpower that transformed a simple kidnapping into fortified resistance. The hostage was secured in the building's center, surrounded by armed men who understood that their survival depended on maintaining their human shield. Jinwoo led the primary assault team through smoke and chaos, his movements economical and lethal as he cleared rooms with professional precision. Every shot he fired found its mark. Every tactical decision advanced their objective while minimizing risk to the innocent woman whose life hung in the balance. The command vehicle's communications crackled with updates as Jinwoo's forces systematically dismantled the Choi Syndicate's defenses. Zara monitored multiple radio frequencies, coordinating information flow and identifying threats that individual teams might miss. Her civilian perspective provided insights into enemy behavior that complemented the military expertise surrounding her. "Eastern approach clear," reported Jinwoo's voice through encrypted channels. "Moving toward the central holding area. Resistance is heavier than anticipated but manageable." 3 additional vehicles approaching from the south, Zara responded, studying surveillance feeds on multiple screens. "License plates match Choi reinforcements from our intelligence files. Estimated arrival in 4 minutes." The tactical situation shifted as enemy reinforcements threatened to trap Jinwoo's assault teams inside the warehouse complex. Zara watched the developing crisis through security cameras, recognizing that traditional extraction routes would become death traps within minutes. She made a decision that violated every protocol Jinwoo had established for her safety. "The service tunnels," she said into her radio headset. "The building plans show maintenance access that connects to the storm drain system. I'm going to guide you through an alternate extraction route." Before anyone could stop her, Zara left the command vehicle and entered the warehouse complex through a utility entrance that surveillance had overlooked. Her knowledge of urban infrastructure from social work cases in dangerous neighborhoods provided navigation skills that proved invaluable in the industrial maze. Inside the building, she moved through maintenance corridors with careful precision, following building schematics while avoiding the firefight raging in the main areas. Her goal was simple: reach the hostage before the situation deteriorated further and provide extraction options that military tactics might miss. The bound woman she found in the central room was barely conscious, drugged and beaten but alive. Marcus stood guard with two Choi associates, his attention focused on the tactical radio chatter that revealed his defensive positions crumbling under sustained assault. Zara recognized the moment when stealth became impossible and action became necessary. She emerged from the maintenance corridor behind Marcus's position, using skills learned from self-defense classes taken during the worst periods of their relationship. The improvised weapon in her hand was a wrench from the utility corridor, heavy enough to disable but requiring close proximity that put her at tremendous risk. She struck Marcus across the base of his skull with every ounce of strength and fury accumulated over 3 years of abuse and terror. Marcus collapsed but did not lose consciousness, his hand moving toward the pistol on his belt with instincts honed by months of criminal partnership. Zara grabbed his weapon before he could orient himself, pointing the barrel at his chest with hands steadied by absolute determination. "It's over, Marcus," she said, her voice carrying authority that would have been impossible during their relationship. "Jinwoo's men are coming through that door, and you have 30 seconds to decide whether you surrender or die." The door exploded inward as Jinwoo arrived with his assault team, weapons ready and movements coordinated for maximum lethality. He took in the scene with tactical assessment that transformed into something more personal when he recognized Zara holding Marcus at gunpoint. "You came for her," Jinwoo said, his voice mixing admiration with fury at her risk-taking. "You left safety to save someone you have never met." "She was here because of me," Zara replied, not lowering her weapon. "Because Marcus used my resemblance to her as a weapon against you. I couldn't let her suffer for my choices." Marcus struggled to his knees, blood streaming from his head wound but his eyes still carrying the malicious intelligence that had made him dangerous. "You think you've won," he said, addressing Jinwoo while gesturing toward Zara. "But she's still the same weak woman who needed protecting. She'll never be strong enough for your world." Zara's response came without hesitation, the pistol in her hands speaking with finality that ended Marcus's threats forever. The sound echoed through the warehouse like thunder, followed by silence that confirmed the completion of justice too long delayed. Jinwoo moved to her side, his hands gentle as he took the weapon from her trembling fingers. "You saved her," he said softly, "and you saved us both from a war that could have destroyed everything we've built." The hostages' rescue proceeded with medical precision, Jinwoo's team providing emergency care while coordinating extraction through routes that Zara's urban navigation had identified. The woman would recover fully, her ordeal ending with the knowledge that strangers had risked their lives to ensure her freedom. In the aftermath, as police sirens wailed in the distance and Jinwoo's organization cleaned evidence that could complicate their legal standing, Zara found herself alone with the man whose protection had become something far more precious than safety. "You could have been killed," Jinwoo said, his voice raw with emotions he rarely allowed himself to feel. "When I saw you in that room, facing Marcus with nothing but courage and determination, I realized that losing you would destroy everything I have become." Zara moved into his arms, feeling the tremor in his powerful frame that spoke of fear more profound than any physical threat could inspire. "I couldn't hide while others suffered for my past," she whispered, "but I also couldn't bear the thought of you facing this alone. We're stronger together than apart." The embrace that followed communicated everything their careful arrangement had been designed to avoid. Love had grown between them despite every effort to maintain emotional distance, transforming their marriage of convenience into something that would reshape both their lives forever. "I love you," Jinwoo said, the words carrying absolute honesty that made them more powerful than any weapon in his arsenal. "Not as a contract or arrangement, but as the woman who saw past my reputation to find the man I could become with the right partner." I love you too, Zara replied, her confession sealing their bond with finality that transcended any legal document. Whatever comes next, we face it together as equals and partners. The war was over, their enemies defeated, but their real journey together was just beginning. In choosing to fight for each other rather than merely accepting protection, they had discovered that true strength came not from dominance, but from partnership built on mutual respect and unwavering devotion. 6 months after Marcus Richardson's death, Zara stood in Jinwoo's study holding the contract that had brought them together. The document felt heavier than its physical weight suggested, each page representing the careful distance they had maintained before love transformed their arrangement into something neither had anticipated. The marriage contract is complete, Jinwoo said, his voice carrying formal precision that barely contained deeper emotions. All terms have been fulfilled. My grandmother has accepted our union. My position within the organization is secure, and the external threats to your safety have been permanently eliminated. He moved to the window overlooking Seoul's sprawling metropolis, his silhouette framed against the morning light. As agreed, you are free to leave. I have prepared accounts in 3 different countries, documentation for new identities, and transportation to any destination you choose. Your obligations to me and my family are officially terminated. The offer of freedom hung between them like a bridge she could cross into a life without danger, without the constant awareness of violence lurking beneath luxury's surface. She could disappear into anonymity, become someone Marcus had never touched and Jinwoo would never find. Instead, she tore the contract in half. The sound of ripping paper seemed to echo through the study's silence, each tear deliberate and final. Jinwoo turned from the window, his expression transforming from controlled formality into something vulnerable and desperate. I'm not leaving, Zara said, her voice steady despite the magnitude of her decision. Not because I have nowhere else to go, and not because I'm afraid of facing the world alone. I'm staying because I choose you, Jinwoo Park. I choose this life we've built together, the partnership we've created, and the love that grew despite every effort to prevent it. Jinwoo crossed the room in 3 swift strides, pulling her into his arms with reverent desperation. You could have any life you wanted, he whispered against her hair. Safety, normalcy, freedom from the darkness that surrounds my world. Why would you choose to remain in a cage? Because it stopped being a cage the moment you gave me the keys, she replied, meeting his gaze with absolute certainty. This compound isn't my prison anymore. It's our home. Your organization isn't a criminal empire I'm trapped within. It's a family that protects those who cannot protect themselves. 3 weeks later, they stood before Jinwoo's grandmother in the traditional Hanok house where family ceremonies had been conducted for 4 generations. The wedding celebration blended Korean traditions with acknowledgments of Zara's African-American heritage, creating a ceremony that honored both their histories while establishing their shared future. Zara wore hanbok silk the color of deep emerald, the traditional dress tailored to complement her natural beauty while respecting cultural significance. Jinwoo appeared in formal Korean wedding attire, his usual business suits replaced by clothing that connected him to ancestral customs and family honor. Park Eun-hee presided over the ceremony with dignity, befitting her position as family matriarch, her approval evident in the warmth that replaced her initial skepticism. You have proven yourself worthy not just of my grandson's love, she said to Zara during the traditional tea service, but of the responsibility that comes with our family name. You will guide our organization into the next generation with wisdom and strength. The wedding guests included leaders from legitimate business ventures alongside carefully selected representatives from allied crime families, a gathering that demonstrated the complex duality of Jinwoo's existence. Zara moved through the reception with natural grace, her conversation revealing intelligence that impressed men who had initially viewed her as merely decorative. She is not what any of us expected, one elderly Don observed to Jinwoo during the celebration. But perhaps that is exactly what our changing world requires. A leader who understands both strength and compassion. In the months that followed, Zara's integration into Jinwoo's organization revealed capabilities that surprised even her husband. Her background in social work translated into innovative approaches to community relations and conflict resolution, transforming the syndicate's reputation from purely predatory into something more complex and nuanced. She established programs that provided legitimate employment for former criminals seeking to leave dangerous lives behind, created educational opportunities for children in neighborhoods controlled by their organization, and developed networks of support for women escaping abusive relationships. The irony was not lost on either of them that her own experience with violence had prepared her to help others find safety. Jin-woo watched his wife's transformation of their empire with admiration that deepened into something approaching awe. "You are making us stronger," he told her during one of their evening walks through the compound's gardens. "Not through fear or intimidation, but through loyalty earned rather than enforced." "We're making each other stronger," Zara corrected, her hand finding his with familiar comfort. "Your protection gave me the safety to heal from my past. My perspective is helping you build something that will last beyond violence and fear." The success of their partnership became evident in ways both subtle and dramatic. Rival organizations found themselves facing an adversary who could offer alternatives to warfare, while community leaders discovered that cooperation with the Park Syndicate brought genuine benefits rather than merely avoided consequences. Their personal relationship evolved with equal success, passion and partnership blending into something more powerful than either had experienced before. Jin-woo's protective instincts channeled into devotion that honored Zara's independence while ensuring her safety. Her strength complemented his in ways that made their combined capabilities exceed what either could achieve alone. 1 year after their first meeting at the compound gates, Zara sat beside Jin-woo in the conference room where he conducted the most important business of his organization. Crime family leaders from across Asia listened as she presented proposals for territory expansion through economic development rather than violent conquest. The woman who had once pounded desperately on iron gates now commanded respect from men whose power could reshape nations. She spoke with authority earned through intelligence, courage, and results that spoke louder than any reputation. "Your approach intrigues us," said the representative from Hong Kong's most influential syndicate. "But can you guarantee that cooperation will prove more profitable than traditional methods?" Zara smiled with confidence that had been forged in fire and tempered by love. "Profit built through partnership lasts longer than wealth stolen through violence," she replied. "We're offering you the opportunity to build empires that your grandchildren will inherit intact rather than destroyed by endless warfare." The meeting concluded with agreements that would reshape criminal enterprise across 3 countries, transforming competition into collaboration and violence into strategic partnership. As the delegates departed, Jin-woo remained behind with his wife, both of them recognizing the historic significance of what they had accomplished. "You have exceeded every expectation I could have formed," he said, his voice carrying wonder that had nothing to do with business success. "When you came to my gates seeking protection, I thought I was saving one desperate woman. Instead, you have saved me from becoming a man I no longer recognized." Zara leaned against his shoulder, feeling the solid strength that had become her anchor in a world she had never imagined entering. "We saved each other," she corrected. "You gave me safety when I had nowhere else to turn. I gave you partnership when you were facing a future alone. Together, we've built something neither of us could have created independently." As evening descended over Seoul, they stood together on the compound's highest balcony, looking out over the city that had become their kingdom. The light stretching toward the horizon represented millions of lives touched by their decisions, a responsibility that bound them together more surely than any legal contract. The dragon had found his treasure, not in gold or territory conquered through violence, but in a woman whose courage had transformed his empire into something worthy of her partnership. The sanctuary he had offered a desperate refugee had become the foundation for a love that would reshape their world for generations to come. In choosing to stay when she could have left, Zara had proven that true strength lay not in dominance but in devotion freely given. Their love story had begun with desperate necessity but evolved into something precious enough to build an empire around, dangerous enough to be worth protecting with their lives, and powerful enough to change the very nature of what it meant to rule through fear versus inspire through hope.